Hey everybody, welcome to PTW Amps in Quebec, Canada. On the bench we have a couple of Pine amplifiers made in Montreal in the 1960s, possibly early 70s, but the majority of these belong to the 1960s. Certainly this one is 60s. I'm going to play a little bit. These are both Pine Model 725s, although quite different in the way that they've been refurbished and modified. I'll start with what you heard was the bottom one, which is running 40 watts, this Mansfield branded, both made by the Pine Company, but these are stencil amps with different badges on them to suit different people that would order them to sell different stores and department stores and things like that. So the top one is a fairly close to original branded Supreme Pine 725. It's got two 6V6 power tubes. It's about a 15 watt amp. I'm going to play through it a little bit. Just first of all, clean Fender Stratocaster straight into the amp, and then I'll add in a Marshall Governor overdrive and a Hall of Fame reverb just so you can hear it with some pedals. So first of all, starting clean on the Strat, neck pickup. Kick on the pedals. Alright, so that is the 266 15 watt 725. Now this one at the bottom has been modified quite a lot. Most of it prior to my receiving the amp, although I've done a little bit of extra work on it as well. I'll talk about that a bit later in the video. So this one has considerably more output, about 40 watts. Again, just clean, and then I'll step on the pedals. Alright, so let me talk a bit about these two amps, and then I'll also talk a little bit about the one on the left. Pine was owned by a man called Saul Pinchuk in the 60s. I guess he ran an electronics shop and started building these amps. I have seen them actually branded Pine Electronics, although more often you'll find Paul, Supreme, Mansfield. I've seen Riviera, I've seen Imperial, I've seen different badges on these amps. Mansfield, for instance, was the house brand of Pete Music, P-E-A-T-E, in Montreal. And so different retailers would order these things up and they would get badged however you want. Now, a lot of times people searching, buying these on Craigslist or pawn shops or whatever, where these things tend to turn up, will sometimes mistake them for garnets or other amps of that period. The way to identify if you find one of these, it as a Pine as opposed to like a Lithgow, a Garnet, a Trainer, or whatever else, is it'll have the CSA number LR19952. LR19952. These both have that number. So that is the CSA number for Pine. And 725, the model number, is stamped on both of these. This one actually says on top Pine Electronics, although it's badged Paul, and says model 201. Now this one on top is running two 6v6s. It's about 15 watt output, and believe it or not, it was originally a PA amp. That's why it's called PA725, and you can see a kind of stylized PA logo here. The inputs were lacking grid resistors and things that would make it appropriate for guitar, so I actually added those in. I rewired the inputs to make it a little bit more like a Fender Bassman type of amp would be wired. Although this is a single channel amp, unlike a Blackface Bassman. It's been recapped. It's had a JJ can capacitor put in, a 3-prong cord, the usual kind of TLC that a vintage amp needs, but otherwise left as close to original as possible. This one, when I received it, this is my own. This one's a customer's amp. This one's my own amp. When I got this a couple of years ago, I discovered that the original transformers had been changed, so there is a new Hammond output transformer and a new power transformer. Has no brand name on it, but the amplifier now is actually more like a kind of Bassman type of amp. It puts out probably about 40 watts, and the 6v6s were replaced with 6L6s. So as you probably heard in the demonstration, this amp is quite a bit more powerful in terms of output. Not always what you want, you know. Sometimes a little 15 watter is the better amp for a club gig or something where you don't want too much volume. Now, a little bit about this one on the left. This is a so-called Widowmaker amp, which means it lacks a power transformer, and these amps can be very dangerous unless you run this or either install a power transformer or run it through an isolation transformer, because the AC from the wall is rectified directly in DC to run the circuit, so there is no isolation between the circuit and you, essentially, so they can be a shock hazard. Now this one I didn't demonstrate because it's basically waiting for a donor transformer. When I get an appropriate transformer, I will redo this as a kind of Fender Champ type of amplifier. So just be cautious if you're buying these kinds of amplifiers. Make sure that you have a tech look at it. Make sure they have 3-prong cords with a safety ground. Make sure the transformers are good, and all that kind of basic safety stuff is very important. A lot of these amps, they're kind of off-brand, so they were not particularly valued or treasured. Still aren't really. This is why you can get them quite cheaply. But decent enough when they're fixed up. It's just a matter of putting the work in that they need. Now, what I thought I'd do is for this Mansfield 725 Mansfield branded amp on the bottom, I thought I'd show you a before and after shot of some of the work that I did on it. So when it arrived, it had already been modified. You can see on the screen here that there are old ports where the original transformer would have been, but the transformer was changed to a Hammond 50 watt transformer. There's a bunch of extra leads that have been tied off and so on. The fuse holder was broken. Poor job done on installing. There was a 3-prong cord installed, but poorly done. You can see, if you can see here, just bare wire where it's just been kind of tack soldered, so that's definitely a no-no. It had all the original caps that were pretty leaky and so on. So here's the after shot of the same chassis. So what I've done, I've installed a new 3-prong cord with a safety ground to the chassis, so everything is safe electrically. Put in the, if you look in the old, had a solid state rectifier installed with these diodes just kind of hanging off of this terminal strip, so not very efficient, not very secure. And I made a little bridge rectifier on a little eyelet board here, turret board I should say, and put that in. New filter capacitors. Tried to leave the tone caps in place, although a couple of them needed replacing. I put in a couple of Mallorys there. and just the kind of general TLC that this amp needed to be efficient and sound good. The original, another problem that you might find in these old point-to-point wired amps is the heater wires that run the filaments for the tubes are just even hard to find them. They just kind of snake through any which way along the chassis, running alongside other wires and this type of stuff. A little bit of a rat's nest. So I reran the heater wires, you can see here, raised above the rest of the circuitry because of the high current that those filament wires carry. So doing that in a little bit more of a modern way cuts down on the noise, makes everything run more efficient. So there you have it. If you find these amps, you don't want to pay too much for them, but if you find one of these for, you know, $100 or $200 at a garage sale, you know, Craigslist, pawn shop, what have you, if you know somebody that can do a little bit of upgrading, these are pretty decent amps for low cost. So thanks for watching. PTW Amps, subscribe to my YouTube page, and you can find PTW Amps on Facebook to have a look at some of the other stuff I've been working on. Thanks for watching.